Hey guys, we're going to do a video on how I judge handles for quality, some truth about handles for tools, axes, all that stuff, and kind of some of the myth that's out there to dispel. Now, I think two of the worst things that have happened to the axe community is that Axe to Grind documentary and Wrangler Star, because everybody takes everything said in them as gospel. And not everything in them is, perfect. And what I want to talk about is just some of the stuff that gets repeated a lot and just isn't quite necessary. And we're going to talk too about what I look for in handles, how to pick a good one if you're going to a hardware store, you're picking one out, what to look for, what not to look for. And this one here, which is an example of a superb handle, I wanted to show you as an example. So there's a couple things I consider. Number one, I look at the grain orientation, which is the direction that the grain is running. Now, oftentimes, there will be marks from the lathe or machining or saw marks on there, and people will confuse those for grain marks. Pay attention, guys. Make sure, I know, especially if you're new to tools and all that, sometimes you can see those machine marks and think, oh my God, I got a bad axe, No, lots of times you will see saw marks across them, and they will look like grain lines, but they are not. Your grain lines, if you have question, put like a dab of motor oil or something on there and they will stick out, or even rub coffee on it, and those grain lines will become apparent and the saw lines won't be so apparent. You generally want them to be vertical like this. Think of it like hitting someone with a phone book. If you hit them, with the phone book flat, the phone book's going to fold in half. You hit them with the spine of the phone book, it's going to stay nice and rigid. So that's what you want to consider with grain orientation. Now, optimally, you are going to want something that is very close to this, which is in line with the blade. Now, it doesn't need to be perfect. Oftentimes they say the best handles are actually offset by 10 to 20 degrees. That being, if you were, say, to hit a knot, you take your swing, you hit the knot, and the knot, say, twists or turns that head of your axe, you're not putting as much torque on it because, it's not directly 100% in line. It's off a little bit, so you're not torquing that straight, perfect line there. So it gives you a little bit of that. To be honest, I've heard that advice, and I've heard it, and I've used a lot of different axe handles, some of them with the grain orientation being completely opposite, and have been unable to break them. Oftentimes, I think grain orientation is the least important thing when it comes to strength of the handle. And I know this is where people go, no way, it says in an axe to grind, you have to. Okay, get yourself untriggered, and let's talk about it. Now, grain orientation, like I said, with the phone book, you consider hitting someone with the flat part of the phone book versus hitting them with the edge of the phone book. Now, here's the thing. If you hit them with the flat part of the phone book, that phone book's not going to break in half because those pages are all connected at the spine. They're not just going to fall apart. Likewise, your handle isn't going to just fall apart because you hit it against the grain, because they're attached. There are, resins and glues in the wood that hold this thing all together. Now, a good hickory handle is going to have enough flex where it's not going to matter. That shock is going to get absorbed, it's going to go through the handle, and it won't be an issue. The most important thing is grain run out, which is when the grains of the axe run out of the handle and don't make it from end to end. That is where you have the most failures of a handle. And if you don't believe me, guys, start going to flea markets, garage sales. Anytime you see an axe with a broken handle, pick up that handle, and I guarantee you 75% of the breaks are going to be along grain run out. And grain run out, you can see almost as an example right here, is when you have grains that don't run end to end. Now, in this case, this is happening because the wood is thicker at one point and not the other. So, of course, you're going to have grains that don't go end to end because, if you were stacked flat, obviously this is higher than the area down here. But if you look, the grains on this, you can follow them, run end to end. Now, what you don't want to look out for is a handle where the grain starts here, maybe takes a twist, and then runs out up here. That creates a really weak point in the handle that will break. No matter which your grain orientation is, whether it's perfect or backwards, grain runout will kill you long before orientation does. Because it's like having, part of the spine of your phone book ripped out, and then you whack it. Of course, it might fall apart because now you don't have that whole spine holding it together. It's only being held together by half the spine. So consider it that way. So for me, I look at the grains of the axe and how straight they are. That's what I want. They can be offset. They can do some weird stuff, guys, and they can look like grain runout, like this here. Looks like grain runout, but it's not because of the thickness of the handle. What you want to do is look at the center and make sure at the center of the handle that those grains are running from end to end. Those will be your best axe handles. And you know what, if you want to doubt it and you want to stick with, well, Wrangler Star says, okay, I get he said it. Look at the U.S. Forest Service. Their requirements for an axe have no specification for grain orientation. They prefer it to be in line with the blade, but it's not a requirement for the U.S. Forest Service to accept the handle. They do, however, have and will reject ones that have grain runout. Grain runout is more important. Third thing is flaws. Things like knots, little dry spots. Some people have issues with the heartwood, the dark wood, and the light wood. I don't. I've never had one break along that line, but I have had them break, when there's small knots and things like that. That is a structurally weak area of the wood. They can break around it. I think because, maybe when you hit it, the harmonics are a little different. They resonate a little differently and break along those knots. So I avoid handles with knots. I avoid handles with bird pecks and wormholes and things like that because they are, kind of inherent flaws. Another thing I look at is how tight the wood grains are. If they're nice and even. What you don't want is super tight over here and super, wide over here, or any combination thereof. What you want is nice, uniform, tightly spaced grain lines. Those are what give you the best handles. So if I see one that has really, really super wide grain lines, I tend to avoid it because in the end, you think about the phone book analogy. If you're hitting someone with a phone book versus you're hitting someone with a stack of corrugated cardboard, how much easier is it to keep that phone book together versus a stack of corrugated cardboard? Why? It's surface area and friction. That phone book has more friction. It has more layers. Which is why that thing, how you can interlace phone books together, like interweave them and you can't pull them apart because the friction on the pages is too much. Think of it like that. The more of those grains you have in there, the more kind of everything's holding itself together. So I do look at that, and yeah. So those are some of the really important things I look at in a handle, guys, and you're going to see this, and every time it's like people are going to show an axe and they'll say, oh, the grain orientation, and they'll show it and it's like maybe like 35 degrees off, and they're like, oh, this is garbage. And guys, from experience, grain orientation will not kill a handle. Go out, you get an axe like that, go out and pound on it. Pound on it for just days and days and days, hitting it just 90 degrees on wood, wrenching it out of knots, and you'll see it is not going to break that handle. It will take a long time to break it, as long as those other things are in line. Now, when you get to the point, and most modern handles are pretty much garbage, when you go to a hardware store, you can have 2 or 3 flaws in a single handle. You can have bad grain orientation, you can have run out, and you can have flaws in there, which pretty much makes those things ticking time bombs. But you know what, guys? Don't believe me. Go out, when you go to antique stores, when you go to flea markets, when you go to yard sales, and you see broken tools, it doesn't matter what kind of tool it is, whether it's an axe, a shovel, a hammer, when you see those broken handles, pick them up and look at them. And 9 times out of 10, that break is going to be along grain runout. Not 9, I'd say 7 times out of 10 it's going to be grain runout. And then other times, a lot of the failures you're going to see with handles is actually ones that start in the head and then break maybe along a line like that. And those happen because of the process of hanging the actual axe. You have to bear in mind this axe has a kerf, which is a split in it. And oftentimes people drive that wedge too deep. And what that does is it starts a little crack at the bottom of the kerf, you start slamming these things, slam, slam, slam. Over time, that crack gets bigger, 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 and then boom, and then your head goes flying off. Those are not really, when you see those axes that break, you know, down, usually what you'll see is they'll break and then kind of come out to the side. Those are caused by too aggressive of a hang, that wedge getting down in there and causing a little bit of a split at the bottom of the kerf. And that can be a bit of an issue. You'll see a lot of axes break like that, but the rest of them you tend to see usually break at grain runout or abuse. You know, people who do overstrikes, hit the handle against something, you'll see they often have duct tape on them, kind of because they've smacked it so many times. But minus the abuse, you tend to see a pretty predictable pattern of breaks over time. Start doing it, guys. Every time you see a broken tool, pick it up and look at it, and you'll notice a pattern. You'll notice and start to see that sometimes you'll find old, I'm telling you guys, go to flea markets, you will find old handles that are like 50, 60 years old that have like complete opposite grain orientation, but they have survived 50, 60 years. Why? Because it's the grain orientation isn't that important, guys. I'm sorry. Wrangler Star is wrong. And axe to grind, this information is right. Yes, we do prefer and want the better grain orientation, but in the end, it's not the most important thing. So, putting it out there, what I look for, like I said, most important thing, if you want a good handle that will last you a long time, find one where you can take at the back of the head, the grain, and run entirely down the back. If it twists over onto the side, it turns, you're going to create runout anytime you have a twist in there. Yeah, but the better and straighter those grains, the better off you're going to be. That's what I look for. Just don't get fooled. Like I said, don't get fooled by swells, because swells are always going to create runout. Now, when you add a swell with a slight amount of twist, it can create very interesting runouts that might, like a grain line might go here and then kind of go over here, and it looks like it's running out, but it's really not. So, guys, just sit there and trace them out and look and see. Usually, if it's a good handle, the ones in the back and the middle will run end to end. If it's a good handle, you should be able to take this and follow it all the way down to the end. That's a good handle. Hope you guys enjoyed.